Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Conscious Eating Evolution series. I'm Karina, a conscious eating catalyst and soul relationship guide, and have created this series to give you a more holistic overview around the transformative power of food, so you are enabled and empowered to make healthier and more mindful choices for yourself and this planet. And today we are going to have a look into the concept of conscious eating and spiritual nutrition with Dr. Gabriel Cousens, who has actually written a book on each one of those topics. And Dr. Gabriel Cousens functions as a holistic physician, homeopath, psychiatrist, family therapist, Ayurvedic practitioner, and is a Chinese herbalist. In addition, he's a world-leading diabetes researcher, ecological leader, spiritual master, and founder and director of the Tree of Life Foundation and Tree of Life Center US. In addition, he is a best-selling author of many books, such as those that I've already named. And there is a cure, and as well as for the books like There's a Cure for Diabetes, Rainbow Green Life Food Cuisine, Creating Peace by Being Peace, and many more. He's considered one of the leading live food vegan medical doctors, holistic physicians, and the world expert on spiritual nutrition. A warm welcome from my side, and I am so happy that you join us today.
Okay, Karina, I'm very happy to be here and to share the work on spiritual nutrition, which really was my very first book in 1986.
Wow.
Spiritual Nutrition and the Rainbow Diet.
Okay, awesome. So for the people that might not know you yet, it'd be great to have a little insight about your work, and then as well, what led you to the place you're in right now.
Well, it's a kind of a funny story, but in 1975, I received a Shakti pot, which is the disintegration to awaken the Kundalini energy, which is the spiritualizing energy within all of us. And when it awoke, and I kind of merged in nothing as I came out, a little voice rang out. This is 1975. It said, you should learn to eat and live in a way that supports the Kundalini energy, which again is the spiritualizing force within every person. So I took that seriously as a little divine message, because I wasn't exactly expecting that. It wasn't on my mind, and nothing was on my mind at the time. And so I began doing research, and I was very much involved in spiritual life, living in India and so forth, and was a doctor, holistic doctor to thousands of people. And I simply began to observe what's the best diet for supporting spiritual life. That was the key question. And what it came out to was at least an 80% live, 100% plant-based or vegan diet. That's what got clear. And so in 1986, I wrote my very first book, is Spiritual Nutrition and the Rainbow Diet. That's what motivated me. As simple as that.
Wow. Interesting. And so could you let us know as well, because you have not only written the book on spiritual nutrition, which we will pick up on a little later, but maybe first and foremost start with the concept of conscious eating or the understanding of conscious eating.
Right. So conscious eating has multiple levels, but let's say, put it in a simple way. What we eat affects us spiritually, mentally, emotionally, and also physically. So the energetics of what we eat affects our consciousness. Now, our consciousness, of course, affects our actions in the world. And the more conscious we become in our eating patterns, the key then is to eat in a way that uplifts ourselves spiritually, mentally, emotionally, and physically, but also the living planet. So what we eat consciously then is something that's going to benefit ourselves, all humanity, and the living planet. That's the key of conscious eating, is in essence seeing all the ramifications of what we eat and how it affects people. For example, when we take in meat, fish, chicken, and dairy, we're taking in the energy of death, and of being a captive. Okay? So even though you drink milk, you didn't kill the animal, but the animal's a captive, and the milk isn't really going to feed its babies. Okay? So all that, when we're eating meat, fish, chicken, dairy, and so forth, is that we take in victim consciousness. Now that's going to affect our consciousness. Okay? So that's the idea. So we want to eat consciously in a way that we're not taking in victim consciousness, we're not taking in misery. I had two spiritual teachers, and Swami Prakashananda being one of them, used to say it this way: when we kill an animal, we create misery and fear and pain. When we eat that animal's flesh, we're taking in the misery, fear, and pain of that animal as a vibration, and it comes out in us in terms of misery, pain, and also disease. So when we're consciously aware of this, then we will choose not to do that. We'll choose to live with the principle we call ahimsa, which is to live and eat in a peaceful way, which creates peace on every level on the planet.
Wonderful. And so some people might not be really familiar with energetic, like with energy or vibration. May you talk a little bit more about that? So like how that really affects our, like about the energy body maybe, and as go beyond what, we just think about, like whenever we take food in, that it just becomes our cells and that's what we're made of.
We are actually multiple levels. And when I explain it is that we have a physical body, and then we have what we call an energetic body, a pranic body, and we have a subtle mental body, and we have a spiritual body. Different levels, different systems describe it in different ways. So everything we interact with also has the different energy bodies. Plants have a subtle body, animals have a subtle body, and then an emotional body or astral body. When we eat them, the animals, we're taking that into us, and it creates a dissonance. So they're energy fields, and everything has different levels of energy fields. So that's the key concept, is how do you take in energy fields, in a sense, understand food is energy. That's the key principle. How do you take in in a way that supports healing, healthy, and harmonious energy fields? Death, misery, pain creates a distorted and unhealthy energy field. And if we kind of see it that way, but think energy field, and that's kind of as simple as we can make it. Now, there is also what we call spiritual energy, different than an energy field. Kundalini is the primordial spiritual energy within every person, stored at the base of the spine, and when it's awakened, it moves through the system, activating all the subtle energy points. Now, I don't want to get too into detail here, but in the yogic system, there's 72,000 nadis. Those are the energy channels through which the spiritual energy flows. 3 main ones and 1 central one called the Sushumna. When we eat meat, fish, chicken, and dairy, it clogs these spiritual energy channels and blocks the flow of the spiritual energy, which we call Kundalini. So impairs the evolution of consciousness. That's the kind of the key thing to really understand in the discussion, is that meat, fish, chicken, and dairy block those energy channels. Now, I actually observed it because I started the first Kundalini crisis clinic in the world, 1976, and I could see what people would do. And if they felt there was too much energy, they may go to eating meat to slow it down. So they actually got how to, not the best way, but they got a way to slow down the movement of the spiritual energy, which is by eating death. And that definitely slows down the spiritual energy, which is about life and evolution. So that's a way of understanding it. The key is understanding the channels and what they call nadis, and what we eat affects those channels. Now, there's more to it. I'll get more detail, but we call it the layers of the mind, which are known as koshas.
Okay.
And the layers of mind are different than the layers of the body. So those layers of the mind are also affected by what we eat. And so the highest layer of the mind is called Anandamaya Kosha, or the bliss body. It's right before we kind of wake up spiritually. Now, the key here is that if we're taking an energy of death, it blocks and disrupts the flow of the bliss body, of the bliss layer of the mind. So it impairs the inner bliss that is really our birthright. That's the key. And the way in eating for spiritual nutrition is, how do we become superconductors of the flow of the spiritual energy, which then allows us to uplift our consciousness rather than suppress our consciousness. That's a way of doing it. Now, we can't eat our way to God. That's important to get. But we want to have all the clear channels, the nadis, and what most people know are the chakra systems, to be clear so they can function at their optimum. That's what we can get from eating this way, is we take in this energy, it helps us function at our optimal for the conduction of the spiritual energy throughout our whole system, and then expanding what we call prana, a yogic term, or chi, Chinese term. As we expand that, then there's an expansion of consciousness. And to do that, we don't want to have any blockages. So the key thing with food is not only do we get energy from it, the spiritual, but we don't create blockages. That's the key concept. So we become then a superconductor of the spiritual energy.
So it's really about not clogging the system, but rather opening it up.
The energetic system.
Energetic system, yeah. And so are there other foods as well that, besides animal products, that really block the system, the energetic system as well?
Basically, when we look at almost all the spiritual paths, except maybe one, they're all basically a vegan system. Now, I'm going to qualify that because the ancient yoga system did include a little bit of dairy. And the reason was, in the ancient times, they didn't have B12 supplements, right? And so they intuitively understood that they had to have a little bit of the dairy to give them the B12. Now that's not a problem. So when we truly look at that, even the very dairy-oriented movements like the Krishna movement, the head of that movement, I have a quote by him, basically said, if you can do just fruits and vegetables, that's great. You don't need to have dairy. So a few thousand years ago, yeah, you did need to have dairy because we had no other reasonable source of B12. So there are certain things in dairy that were helpful. And so I kind of keep that in mind. But we have to talk current, not 1,000 or 2,000 years ago in our discussion, because we're evolving, the planet's evolving, different things are happening. So in today's discussion, dairy is a problem. Another reason dairy is a problem is that when we eat higher on the food chain, we have significantly more pesticides and herbicides and radiation. What does that mean? Well, the research at the governmental levels in the United States actually points out that 95 to 97% of the pesticides, herbicides are stored in the animal fat. So obviously, by eating lower in the food chain, you have significantly less exposure to toxins.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a common sense part of it. Well, dairy from a cow is going to have more of that. An example of that is they did a study with vegetarian, quote, vegan mothers, and in their breast milk, they only had 1% the amount of pesticides and herbicides as the breast milk of meat-eating mothers. That's a pretty significant statement. 99% less pesticides, herbicides, and difficulty.
Mm-hmm.
You see what I mean? And by eating lower in the food chain.
Mm-hmm.
So those are key little things to kind of appreciate. So I would say the best we can say is that when we eat lower in the food chain, we get about 1/30th amount of pesticides and herbicides. In kids, we just give them organic food, they'll have 2 to 4 times less pesticides and herbicides. That's another piece, the same principle.
And then in this case, it is not just about us, but it's as well about the planet. When we eat lower on the food chain, like lower in the food chain, we have a lower impact actually on the environment.
Significantly lower impact. A vegan saves about 1.5 million gallons, so that's what, 6 million liters of water per year, a whole swimming pool. Okay, and we use about, depending on the estimates, between 7 and 29 times less energy. So I round it off to 12 times when you do all the studies. So vegan is creating 1/12 the amount of energy loss to the planet as a meat eater. So you have water and you have energy. If you look further, we also have what we call like warming gases. So methane from the animals is 27 times more global warming than carbon dioxide.
Carbon dioxide, yeah.
And the ammonia from cow manure is 296 times more global warming. So by eating lower on the food chain, we're creating less global warming energies. We're using 1/12 on the average the amount of overall energy, and we need one meat eater takes the amount of land and resources of 14 vegans. So less land, less toxins, more energy. It goes on and on when we see the bigger picture, that we have a significantly lower impact on the environment than meat eaters. And I think that's important. We have a disease impact too. So we know that meat eaters have 35 to 50% more diabetes. There's some definite problems in meat, but I don't want to go all that direction here. I'm trying to make a point that when we eat lower in the food chain, we are healthier, we use up less energy, we're going to have less diabetes, less heart disease, like 1/3 less heart disease, and significantly less cancer, and 1/4 the amount of osteoporosis than people eating meat, fish, chicken, and dairy. So there's multiple levels. But for me, the most important level was my initial directive in 1975. How do you eat in a way that improves spiritual life? And there's no question on it, as all the great spiritual paths but one talk about a vegan diet as being the best diet, as we factored into today's life.
So it's like for spiritual development, but as well in health-wise, nutrition-wise. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Well, nutrition-wise, we're looking at meat eaters have 32% more heart disease. Okay, major study. The Oxford study with 44,000 people. Okay, the study in terms of the diabetes, 35 to 50% more, is a study with over 1.25 million people. So people who are vegan are going to have, 35 to 50% less type 2 diabetes. Okay, osteoporosis, both for men and women, there will be 1/4 the amount of osteoporosis health-wise. Okay, that's a big deal. Cancer, depending on meat, dairy, and so forth, we're talking in terms of colon cancer, about 3 times less. In terms of leukemias and lymphomas, people eating dairy are going to have 2 to 3 times more, up to 4 times more ovarian cancer. So pretty much all the chronic diseases. For high blood pressure, meat eaters, 26% of meat eaters have high blood pressure, 2% of vegans. So we're looking at all the major chronic diseases, and it's like by eating vegan, you are much less likely. Longevity. So vegans who are men, there's approximately, different studies, but 7.2 years longer, and vegan women live 4.4 years longer than meat-eating women and meat-eating men. So that's very significant in terms of longevity. So all these things, longevity, quality of health, particularly chronic disease, fertility is another thing. What we see is there's been a real increase in infertility, and some of the more recent research shows that infertile couples, when they go to a vegan diet, I think it was 125 different couples, they went to a vegan organic diet, 100% success in becoming fertile again.
Wow.
Yeah, that's very significant. So we all these levels, as well as eating a plant-based vegan diet, is far more uplifting to the spiritual life.
And I think a lot of people are concerned whenever they switch or move to a vegan diet that all their nutrients are going to be covered. Are there nutritional deficiencies that come along with it, or how can you prevent them, especially if there are certain nutrients that might not be as available, or is it just a fad?
That's a common concern. So meat eaters are more likely to be deficient in B3 and B6. Okay, and also vitamin C. Okay. In terms of B12, which is the biggest thing people think about, right, is about 40% of meat eaters are B12 deficient, and about 80% of vegans. But no, that's at the minimum of around 200 nanograms. Optimum is around 400 nanograms, at which point we're looking at maybe 80% of meat eaters and 95% of vegans will be B12 deficient. So however you look at it, meat eaters are more susceptible. So we can say, and I'll say it because it's what I write in my books, that everyone should take a B12 supplement and a folic acid supplement, because being a meat eater doesn't mean you're not going to be deficient. So whether you have a 40% or an 80%, it's still too much. A 40% risk is not worth it. So I recommend that everyone take a B12 supplement. Meat eaters need to take more B vitamin supplements in general, particularly B3 and B6, because they have a higher rate of deficiency. Also, the minerals. You get a lot more minerals in a vegan diet. So the people who are actually, in the long run, running more potential of deficiency are really the meat eaters. In 1936, the U.S. government said that 99% of the population was mineral deficient. So it hasn't gotten any better, and there are a lot less vegans at that point than there are now. So kind of look at the big picture. Meat eaters are going to be more likely to get deficient in a lot of minerals, with the exception of iron. And be deficient in B3, B6, and minimum of 40% being deficient in B12. So what we're coming into in today's poorly mineralized and vitaminized soil is that everybody really needs to take some level of supplements. I call them food concentrate supplements, because our soils and the animals today are actually pretty deficient. So everybody needs some level of supplements, and this whole focus on B12, the research just doesn't support that meat eaters have adequate B12, at least 40% deficient. So it's all kind of a hype to not look at really, you don't get what you need eating meat. And everybody in today's world needs some level of supplementation because the soils are deficient. Take iodine. 95%, different studies, but there was one study with 4,000 people, so 95% of Americans that were tested were deficient in iodine. Other studies around the world, let's say 70 to 90%. Whatever it is, deficient in iodine. Well, you need that for brain development, you need it for mitochondrial function, you need it for your nervous system, you need it for your thyroid, you need it for your skin. The highest organ that has iodine is your skin. Okay? You need it for your adrenals. You need it for proper ovarian function. So we need to take supplementation. That's just one example. So that's the world we're living in, is that the environment is a little bit vitamin and mineral deficient, and we need to support it by taking some supplements that will, neutralize those deficiencies.
And so it's not just the vegans that get deficiencies, but as well there are a lot of deficiencies on one hand because of the poor diet that people have,
right.
but
and the poor soil.
The poor soil.
So pretty much everyone is running some level of deficiency one way or the other.
And so what can you actually do to, as like if you want to transition more into a vegan diet, or especially as you promote it in a more live food diet? So it's more than just vegan, right? How would that look like?
So what I suggest, like in my book, Conscious Eating, is that people move slowly because you have a mental component, okay? And that mental component, I say give up, different level, depending on your style. Give up the fish, which is highly polluted now, and then the chicken, then the beef, and then you can then move into dairy, one step at a time, and then you can look at the grains, but we don't have to go that far. That's still vegan. We made that transition in one day. How did that happen? It's a funny story. So my wife was pregnant with our second child, and we both had a nightmare that night that the fetus was a chicken. And
both together had that nightmare.
We both together had a nightmare.
Wow.
And as soon as we got that, it was like next day we were vegan. Because the whole idea of eating the chicken, eating the fetus was like, that's not acceptable. So that happened in one day, one night. So that's the fast way to do it.
Yes. Yes, but there are some people who need like transition phases, right?
Yeah, they can do it at their rate. They can do, this month I'm giving up this. Okay, good. Next month I'm giving up, the fish, and next month the chicken, next month the beef, and then next month the dairy. So you can go at your pace. It's better to go in a way that's comfortable for yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. And what is it that you say that people need to, when you cut things out, you need to add things in? What would that be what would that be? How would that look like?
Well, that may not be the case. What I see is people who really go to live foods.
Yeah.
Start with cook. When we move to live, we want at least 80% live food because live food has so much energy that we actually don't need to eat as much. So adding more food may not be the best approach, because when you go vegan, you're getting so much more energy. You do not need to eat as much. So naturally, people will lose weight, but you lose weight till you reach your optimum weight. So I'm at a point pretty much as my optimum weight, which I was in high school. And I've been there for years and years and years and years, 45 years. So do you see what I'm saying? So we lose weight till we hit our optimum. Then you titrate how much food you're eating. So I don't really eat dinner. And I have very little for breakfast. I basically eat one meal a day. That evolved over time because I'm extracting the energy from the food at a much higher level. So therefore, when we say, oh, you got to eat more because you're not eating as much. No, you're not eating meat. That actually means you're going to be able to draw more energy from what you're having, and you're getting more nutrient. So not eating meat means you really don't need to eat as much. And that's an important message. People think they need to substitute. No, because nutrition is more than just physical. Nutrition is energetic. And that's teaching in all my books. Nutrition is energetic. That's the key. Now, there is a downside. People can get ungrounded, and I kind of looked at that in the early 80s.
I wanted to ask about that.
Yeah. And what I realized in the early 80s, I saw a variety of people on live food, a lot of wheatgrass type thing, and they were too alkaline. People are always worried about being acid, but they were too alkaline. And when I balanced their alkalinity, acid-alkaline base, then they became grounded again. So how do you know that without sophisticated tests? And we were doing sophisticated tests. But first urine in the morning, the pH should be between 6.4 and 7.2. Okay, it's real simple. You get a pH paper, first urine in the morning, midstream, done. You want to be 6.4 to 7.2. Now, I saw a lot of people, including myself, getting, my urine pH would get up to 8. And then you would tend to get spasms and so forth like that. And some people got really very ungrounded. But when we were bringing the pH down to that range, then they weren't ungrounded anymore. The alkalinity had been back to the right level. German research kind of shows that you don't want to be 7.35. You want to be 7.46 in your blood. The German research is talking 7.35, and that's too acid. So we want to be the 7.46, and on this diet in the blood, it's really easy to get it there. But the trouble with the ungrounded is you can get too alkaline. And then that throws you off too. You have to hit the right point. Without doing blood tests, which we do, we monitor, the urine in the morning is a really easy way to establish the right acid-base balance. That's the biggest cause of being ungrounded.
And people who are not familiar with alkaline or acid-forming foods, what would those be in a vegan diet that they would then eat more of to balance it out?
So in general, fruits and vegetables tend to make you more alkaline. In general, and I say that because people can have the reverse to that. Meat, fish, chicken, and dairy make you more acid. And grains are in the middle. They can make you acid or alkaline depending on your own genetics. But in general, fruits and vegetables, sprouts, tend to be more alkalinizing. They have a lot more minerals, and the minerals, particularly calcium, magnesium, potassium, tend to make you more alkaline.
Okay, that's interesting. And what are common factors or common things that you have noticed along all those years that whenever people do not thrive in this way of eating, what are like common mistakes that they do, or things that, yeah.
So the most common mistake is people think they're cows. I'll let you think about that for a second, okay?
Okay.
What's the point? Cows, everybody, all cows have the same diet, right? They eat grass.
They grass, yeah.
Okay. But humans are much more sophisticated. And we have a variety of gene base, maybe 30,000 genes, and will vary, but probably 100 to 200,000 gene variations. So where I'm going is certain people will have different requirements of protein, fat, and carbohydrate. So about 70% of the population needs a higher protein, and I'll explain what that is in a minute, because, and 30% need a lower protein. Now, let's get in detail.
Yes,
so
please.
There's an optimal path called the mTOR pathway, and that means that you have somewhere between 35 and 70 grams of protein. That's still very low in most people's worlds. 70 grams is not a whole lot. But for optimal longevity and optimal prevention of cancer, 35 to 70 grams is your goal, okay? Now, that being said, so when I say higher protein, I really mean, 70 grams, not 220 grams, which used to be the old belief system, particularly out of Germany. You need lots and lots of protein. That makes you toxic, okay? Excess protein. But we do vary. And so 30% really don't need very much protein, maybe 10%. And then the 70% maybe need 15, 30, 20% of their diet being protein. I will give you an example because it also changes with age.
Okay.
Obviously, a baby is going to need more of that for building. Teenagers are going to need a certain amount because of their maturing. Okay, so between around 45 to 65, the research is done on men, but I think it holds for women too, is that people who are eating excess protein, particularly animal protein, are going to have a double amount of cancer and 4 times greater rate of mortality. Okay, that's important to get. But with age, above 65, you actually need more protein. So it shifts with age. I'll get my example was myself. So I don't need a lot of protein. I was probably having 8%, 10% protein in my diet. And when I was doing this, maybe when I was 70 is when I actually made the breakthrough. I read this data. Oh, well, with age, you need a little bit more protein. So I was doing about 25 pull-ups. You know what I'm talking about? What pull-up is? Okay. And as compared to when I was a captain of an undefeated American college football team, I could do 7. Here I am at 70 doing 25. I added 1 tablespoon of E3 Live, which is a blue-green algae, okay? And within 2 months, I was up to 100 pull-ups.
Wow, just
and that's
for that?
1 tablespoon. What's my point? You have to get the right amount to make it work for you. Then you have
the right source.
Trial and error, but at about 65, then you need to have slightly more protein. So it does vary with age. That's my point here. And we have to adjust. And it's a little trial and error, but that was all I needed. Done, in terms of the whole story, in terms of making those adjustments. It's not fixed. And some people need more protein. That's why I say we're not cows. So protein and fat, what we call in some systems fast oxidizer, which is a way of saying people need more protein and fat, and lower carbohydrate. That's about 70% of the population. And about 30% need a higher complex carbohydrate and lower fat and lower protein. So we vary. The biggest mistake people make is like cows, we think we all need to have a high complex carbohydrate diet, low fat and low protein diet. And that's probably the biggest common mistake that's put out there. And it's a problem. When you see some of the leading, quote, vegans having fish once a week, you know, because they're doing the high complex carbohydrate, low fat, low protein thing, then they're not feeling good and they have to have fish. Well, that's not a vegan argument. It makes it look like you need something else. So the truth is, no. You're in that 70%. Where do you get the protein? Well, you got your protein concentrate, spirulina and chlorella and blue-green algae, nut and seed pâtés. You know, you have more of that and less of the salad. It's not that hard, but it's hard if you don't know what you're doing.
Right, right.
And you think we're all a bunch of cows, that we should only have vegetables and sprouts.
Mm-hmm.
So once we let go of that particular myth, then we can have a lot more success. And when I say that, I'm telling you that 99% of my clients are successful on the vegan diet because we adjust to their genetic constitution. In reality, on chromosome 19, the research shows it tells you how much protein, how much fat, how much carbohydrate you should have. It's in our genes. So the idea is design yourself to fit your genes. Okay? So actually our free gift is connected to a questionnaire that helps people understand whether they're a fast or slow oxidizer. Slow oxidizer means they need more carbohydrate, you know, vegetables and sprouts, and lower amount of protein. Fast oxidizer, higher amount of protein, higher amount of fat, lower amount of vegetables and fruits and sprouts. So we have that little chart there for people, and that will be helpful to them.
Yeah, and definitely, I think.
Yeah. And then we have what we call phase 1, phase 2 diet. So a lot of people are having too much sugar in their diet. It's vegan. Doesn't matter. Sugar is still a problem, whether it's vegan or not, if you get what I'm saying. So we have.
So when you talk about sugar, do you mean processed sugar or do you mean complex carbohydrates with that? Whenever
both.
You talk about that? Both. Okay.
The processed sugar is worse because it goes in faster and creates more of an imbalance.
Right.
But your carbohydrate does convert to sugar. It takes an hour or two, but it still converts to sugar. So our approach, which is healing diabetes naturally, type 2, in 3 weeks, 61% of the non-insulin dependent diabetics are healed. Blood sugar less than 100 in the morning, no medications, no diabetic medications.
That's powerful.
Yeah, it's in insulin dependent, 24% are healed in 3 weeks. Off all insulin and a blood sugar less than 100. So the point I'm making is we use different diets. That diet, we don't really have hardly any carbohydrate. All we have is vegetables and sprouts. And so it's 100% raw because that's the most powerful healing diet. The live food diet is the most powerful. So we get really optimal results. It's going to be your vegan, plant-based, 100% live food is the most powerful healing diet for just about anything, as long as you can balance your alkaline acid base situation. And you make it according to your constitution. So that's the key. So we have a phase chart and it explains what you can have. Phase 1, 1.25, 2. But mostly sugar is a problem. So for vegans thinking I can have sugar, not so good. And fructose is included because fructose imbalances what we call leptin and insulin hormonal regulations, which are your key 2 hormones in treating insulin and treating diabetes.
But it's specifically for people who do have diabetes.
Yeah, but also hypoglycemia.
Glycemia, right.
And candida.
And candida, okay.
So those are your bigger things. And also Alzheimer's, because cognitive decline. Research shows that people who have a higher carbohydrate diet after the age of 70 have 4 times greater cognitive decline. So we really need to have a little bit more protein and a little bit less carbohydrate with age.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And let's just take another, let's go a little bit back to the spiritual nutrition, because I would really like to know, and maybe close it down a little bit more with that, is how can food really accelerate us or help us in our evolutionary process as a human species?
Okay. The way food plays a role is that it helps us expands our consciousness. And so when we eat, like we're talking about, which is 100% plant-based, vegan, and 80% live food, we expand consciousness. When you expand consciousness, then you uplift the whole evolution of the species. I think that's a simple way to understand.
Perfect.
And that's it. We are affected. So if we're going to take the energy of misery and death and victimhood, which is animals and milk, okay, then that's going to affect our consciousness. It's going to contract our consciousness. If we're going to take the energy of life and the expansion of the greens with the prana, we're going to expand our consciousness. And so what we eat affects our consciousness, affects all our thoughts, and then really affects our actions. So, and then it makes it easier to start each thought with love and peace, because those are what are affected. If you're taking in negativity and death, it's hard to think love and peace and oneness, because it's a separation.
Yeah, I love that, because it talks about the interconnectedness of all things, and so
That's
right. Yeah, because it affects also your mind and your emotional body whenever you do take it in.
Exactly. That's the point I'm making. So what we eat affects our spiritual body, our mental body, our emotional body, and our physical body. So this is an interesting story. There's a great saint, a Sufi saint called Rabir. You ever heard of her? But anyway, she's in the forest, and all the animals are around her, and everything's good, and everybody's happy. And then one of her disciples comes, and all the animals run away. He said, "What's the matter? I'm spiritual." She said, "What did you eat for breakfast?" And he said, "Well, I had a little bit of chicken for breakfast." So of course they ran away. You've got the energy of animal death in you, and they got scared. So when we look at, it's a great story in that way. It's very simple. We create a frequency according to what we eat. So if we're going to have harmony with the plant world, harmony with the animal world, then we need to eat in a way that creates the frequency, not of death, but of life.
Yeah, it's beautifully said. And if people would like to work with you, where do they find you, or how can they work with you? May you tell us a little bit about that?
Sure. So they can reach me, simple, drcousens.com. That's it, real easy.
Yeah.
Now, right now, what's happening is we're in a little bit of transition. I have 26 humanitarian programs in 12 different countries.
Wow.
So I'm kind of out there doing that level of work. We are doing what I call meditation liberation retreats, 3-day retreats. And that's a very simple way to come. You come wherever, and it's a 3-day intensive. We're doing Shaktipada, spiritual awakening, Kundalini awakening, 3 times a day. And it's a 3-day intensive. Our next one is in the end of August. So that's kind of a simpler way, an easy way. We are in the midst of reorganizing and setting up a little bit of an internship program for a special kind of organic farming, which doesn't use any animal products in it. And we also have some training. We're in the midst of revising, okay, but training available for the priests and priestesses, and whole vegan live food experience. and that's people coming for 3 weeks to participate in that, plus the meditation retreat. So those are kind of the functional ways.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and as I said, people can intern 3 months to 6 months, mostly on the organic farming, but we have evening programs, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday night, Saturday afternoon, where people will get Shaktipat, and we have spiritual discussion. So those are, and we'll have a limited amount of interns. We're going to keep it very low cost for people. And so that's our plan.
Mm-hmm.
Simple, read my books,
Yes.
.com, real easy, and attending those specific meditation liberation, I call it holistic liberation retreats.
Mm-hmm.
So
Wonderful.
it's easy at this point. We do have some fasting retreats around the world, but that's a little different. We're no longer, well, I'll put it that, we're condensing so I can expand actually my humanitarian programs. Just a question of timing. I'm getting, as I got 26 programs, we're going to expand that, but I have to be available to do that, whether I'm in Africa or Mexico or Argentina or Brazil. We have programs all over the place. That's kind of it. I will be speaking at different places. If people actually want me to come and speak and do a program, like we're going to do one in Romania, in Venice. We have stuff going in Israel, Brazil. I mean, they're different in Mexico. So people have options with the different languages.
Mm-hmm.
I also have a website that's in Portuguese, Spanish, and English, and that's Gabriel Cousens.
Okay.
English is drcousens.com.
Okay. And local, you are in Arizona, right?
Yes.
Okay, good.
We are in the mountains of Arizona. It's actually relatively maybe 10 degrees cooler than Tucson or 15 degrees cooler than Phoenix. So it's very nice. It actually snows here. We got 5 inches people say different things, 5 or 10 inches of snow this winter.
Mm-hmm.
So it does happen. And we're somewhat near the Mexican border. So we're here, I'm here a lot of the time, but we're also doing more traveling as well. Mm-hmm. And, so that's kind of how we do it.
Awesome. And I think we talked already about the free gift, so people will have access to that. And my last question for you, because you are working in the field of, and I'm asking this every expert on the summit, you're working in the field of positive change and having a great impact. My question would be, what is your personal message of hope to the people?
I'm an optimist. And I feel very optimistic. It looks really not so good in the way the world is, but sometimes before change, there's a little bit of difficulty before we have the expansion. So I feel that people look around and say, well, this isn't really so good. Maybe we should change what we're doing. And I think in that bifurcation, will come back to a much more elevated way of living, which works for the whole world.
Yeah, I like that.
I talk about the 6 foundations and 7-fold peace. And I'm not going to go through all of them right now because that's another 20-minute talk.
Okay.
But it's living and eating in a way that elevates the consciousness of humanity. And when we eat and live, the word live, is key because, well, you eat the live food, you do things like yoga and Tai Chi and Qigong, expansion of consciousness, and pranayama, breathing exercises, charity, obviously we're doing a lot of that, working with a spiritual teacher, and then meditating and repeating the different divine names, and as much Shaktipat, the awakening of Kundalini. So I've been empowered by my spiritual teachers or gurus to actually activate the Kundalini, which in India we call it Shaktipat, and different traditions have different names. But so if people can come even one time, that's enough to get it awakened. Usually like in our 3-day meditation retreat, which is an optimal opportunity, which is where I'm going with all this in general, in our next phase of my mission, next 20 years, is 3 times a day, Shaktipat. 90% of the people are going to get their Kundalini awakening, their spiritual energy awakening, and that's like critical for the unfoldment of consciousness. It's the supercharger that moves the consciousness. So all that's available, and we're doing it at least twice a year, but we may go to 4 times a year, but we got to start in a reasonable manner first. I like to work with smaller groups, so I don't like to do more than 70 at once because my style is more personal. I'm not interested in thousands of people. It doesn't meet my style.
Your personal preference, yes.
Yeah.
I love that.
So people come, they're going to get attention. There'll be that connection. So coming to our meditation, liberation, holistic meditation retreats is probably the optimal way to get everything we have. Because I discussed the 6 foundations, 7-fold peace, the meaning of Shaktipat, the awakening of the Kundalini, all that happens. So that's probably the easiest and best way.
Okay. Wonderful. Dr. Gabriel Cousens, I thank you so much for your time. It was really a pleasure to talk to you and have you in the Conscious Eating Evolution series. And yeah, thank you all for watching and joining us today. And
I just want to give just a blessing. I want to bless everyone that we're inspired to uplift our consciousness of ourselves and the living planet and be successful in that. And thank you for Karina for your good work and getting out this kind of work, because this is just right on the mark. It's perfect.
Thank you. Thank you so much. So stay tuned and keep watching. Bye.
Bye.